Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Social Work Services Committee on Wednesday the 6th of October. This meeting is being recorded and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off video when you're not addressing the meeting, if you're not attending the chamber. And also, should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function or indicate to the clerk, which will be interesting today because the clerk is also remote. Just use the Teams chat function and then you'll be invited to speak in the order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we can deal with the business as efficiently as possible. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to leave the Teams meeting for that period of time? And if you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join, this will allow us to monitor member presence. So, item 1 is sederunt and apologies, and also the Chair's approval of members' remote participation. So, Claire, can you please provide the sederunt, including who's participating remotely, and any apologies, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We've got 2 apologies this morning from Councillor Bell and Councillor Ingalls. I understand there's 6 members present in the hall, as well as yourself. We've got the Vice Chair, Councillor John Campbell, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Maitland and Councillor Sloan. There's a number of members not currently present, being Councillors Karen Carruthers, Charteris, Justy, McGregor, McClelland and Tate and Wood. All other members are present on Teams.
Thanks, Claire. Do we have any declarations? Oh, sorry. I confirm agreement to the participation of those members named as participating remotely to be able to be involved in the meeting. So just to get that on record. So declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? I don't see any, so we'll move on to item 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting of 19th of August. This is for noting. Are members happy to note? Okay, thank you. That brings us on to item 4, which is the Social Work Services Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 2021-22 for the period ended 30th of June 2021. We've got Janet Sutton, the Finance Officer, here to speak to this report. Is there anything you'd like to add, Janet?
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing to add to the report at this time.
Members, do we have any questions on the report in front of us? Apologies, Councillor Maitland. On you go.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, it's really just, if I could possibly ask through you for a little bit of explanation about the overspend, the projected overspend, and maybe we could have some reassurance about how this is going to be managed, please.
Thank you. So, did you hear the question there, okay, in terms of being able to answer about the overspend?
Chair, it might be better if I take this response.
Right, okay, Lillian.
Thanks. Happy for Janet to come in. Councillor Maitland, thank you for that question. I think, you know, we've raised at a number of forums about the current pressures of the service, and particularly in children's services. We are dealing with some significant challenges for a lot of our young people in the region. We have had an increase in terms of our intervention requirements, so we've had to increase our fostering and adoption placements. We've had to increase our early intervention team and some of the support that's around that. We have been running a campaign, and Stephen is on the call if required, but we have been running a campaign to try and enhance the amount of foster carers that we have in the region. However, we are facing a challenge that other areas are giving far better terms and conditions to foster parents. So Stephen and Sheila are working on a paper to bring to an up-and-coming committee around some of the challenges that we've faced in securing fostering parents to meet some of that demand. So we have had to use some wider national organisations to assist us. And what we are trying to do is bring that back in within budget, but it would be inappropriate for me not to raise with members the real challenge that the service is facing in trying to meet the significantly increasing demand around all aspects of our service. We are clearly working hard to bring the budget back on target, but I may have to come back and ask members to approve that we use our contingency fund to meet this year's budget. But at this moment in time, at the end of Q1, this is an early indication that we are facing some significant challenges around the increased demand for our service. Happy to give any more detail if required, Councillor Maitland. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Maitland? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Lillian, for that response to Jane's question. I know it's very early days, it was only announced yesterday, but there's some significant support coming in for health social care. When will we know roughly what our share of that is and how that's got to impact on the budget as it goes forward?
Haven't read the full detail of it, as you're correctly indicating. It is only come in, but that effectively will be for adult services. Our biggest challenge at this moment in time is children's services and some additional pressures on our mental health service and our justice teams. However, that funding in whatever guise that comes in will be welcomed. The challenge there will be the consultation and discussion with the Health and Social Care Partnership. We certainly are facing some challenges within the budget for the IJB, for the delegated services, but obviously that winter pressure money will be supportive. However, we certainly now, in the last 3 to 4 years, have had no additional funding directly to social work for children's services, and that continues to be a challenging area. So we haven't had any indication that there will be some winter pressure funding coming forth. There was some that came in December last year, but we had a very short window of opportunity to use that funding for children, and there's potentially some of that may again come this year, but as yet there's no indication, Councillor Ferguson, that will indeed be the case. So undoubtedly the pressure at this moment in time is children's services. Thank you.
Do you want to come back?
Thanks very much, Lillian. I get pretty much the answer I expected. Quite rightly, it's a statement of fact, isn't it? So, when's the next social work committee? So, when will we? Is there a way that we can let the committee members know just exactly what that extra income, even though it is for adult services, not just children's services? So.
Next social work committee is the 2nd of December, but what I can do is, once we have that agreement through the Health and Social Care Partnership, would be if members wish to send that information to committee members or indeed to full council. Happy either way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions up on this report, but there's a couple of things in there that we've just sort of touched upon. One is obviously the next committee. There's an opportunity there for the report to come back on the foster carer work that's ongoing, so I think that would be welcome. And also, as Councillor Ferguson had highlighted there, any monies that we know is coming to the partnership, I think it would be a benefit to not just this committee, but for that to be circulated to members so that they know what we're dealing with, if that can be captured as an action.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Chair. I would envisage that the IJB, which I believe is the 23rd of November, that will be probably presented there, but I can certainly share that with elected members once those conversations have taken place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so in that case, are we happy to note the position based at the end of 2021 and the forecasted overspend of 288,000? And also the progress against the delivery of the agreed policy development allocations as applied to the budget. Okay, thank you. That takes us on to item 5, which is the disposal of Cairnryan House. We've got Sheila Clingan here, Locality Manager, Centralised Services. Sheila, is there anything you'd like to add to the report?
If you give me 1 minute. Hello. No, I would just like to
remind members that the purpose of the report is to present to members an update on the progress of the Social Work Services Service Redesign Consultation process, and that we are asking members to note the progress of the Service Redesign Consultation, which was undertaken with all staff at Ryan House, and the outcome of the consultation process, which is detailed in 3.11 to 3.11.3 to 3.11.6, and to recommend that the strategic asset board that the building Ryan House is access to service requirements as detailed in 3.11.7. Can I just say that the decision for the temporary closure of Ryan House in 2020 was not a decision that was taken lightly. But in light of the findings of the independent care review, as noted in this report, and in consultation with staff, the following points contributed to this decision being reached. And they are the acknowledgement that Ryan House is not fit for purpose, and this point was highlighted in care inspection reports for the service. The changing needs of the young people referred from the east of the region, and the challenges this posed in terms of distance from family, inability to undertake family work, and disruption to schooling and limited contact arrangements. Also, the changing needs of the young people requiring to be accommodated, and the increasing level of physical aggression and behavioural challenges they posed in a group living setting as opposed to a family setting, and the increased number of restraints of young people and the level of severity resulting in the increasing number of assaults to staff and staff absence. I would also say that Ryan House has been closed for admission since March 2020, and there has been no external residential placements in that period, which could have been prevented had Ryan House been open. Therefore, it is not felt that the closure of Ryan House will result in any additional agency placements. A comprehensive service redesign consultation was undertaken with all Ryan House staff, and the service redesign has a dual aim: to deliver an early intervention model, which is a family centre, and to provide an outreach and crisis intervention service. The creation of this service has been welcomed in the area. The service currently engages with over 60 families, compared to working with only 4 children at a time when it was a children's house. The service redesign allows us to support an increasing number of families in their own localities, offering them support when they need it most and providing a whole family centre approach. The feedback from children, young people and families, as noted in this report, has been very positive. Finally, I would say it is anticipated that the closure of the Ryan House and the transfer to community-based services will help ensure that overall spending is continued out to an increasing number of families earlier in periods of crisis, to avoid future fostering and residential placements, supporting families to care for their children and their young people within their own and extended family networks, and achieving positive outcomes for their future. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. I'll hand it over to members. Are there any questions? Tommy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I found this paper very confusing. I didn't know whether it was telling us about the transfer of a house or the progress of a service. I mean, we just talked there about a paper telling us about the progress that social services have made. I'd like to see it, but there is no evidence on the ground that that progress has been made. Ryan House was bought about 10 years ago for a substantial amount of money, and then a substantial amount of money was spent on renovating it, when a lot of the locals at the time and local councillors said it wasn't required. It wasn't what was required. Something was required, but that was not it. It was just a bigger version of Milton House in Stranraer. That's all it was. But I mean, this paper seems to, everything with the kids seems to be based around social services. Do you not think that's wrong? It should be education. They shouldn't be saying to the kid, have you got a social worker? It should be, have you got an education officer? These people would be better placed to guide these youngsters. And I'd like to see them more involved as part of a team within social work, but education to the top. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Sloan. So I suppose there's a bit of a question around the history of the house, and also there's, I suppose, a statement or a wish that things could be done a way that's going to be better that involves education. But I think for this one, I'll pass over to Lillian in the first instance, and maybe she'll be able to help you.
Thank you, Councillor Sloan. Thank you for those questions. I would acknowledge up front that I don't think Kieran Ryan was ever fit for purpose. Had the current social work management been in place, then I don't think that we would have at all asked council members to make that decision. We have worked tirelessly to try and change the culture and change the ethos within the unit. And I think Sheila has reflected that actually staff and the young people and the families are much more involved in taking forward the service. This is more the way in which we wish to deliver our services with our young people. And we are now much more involved in an outreach process and trying to keep young people at home with his support. In terms of the multi-agency elements to the service, you're absolutely correct. We are working in conjunction with all of our partners and particularly our colleagues in education through the planning groups and making sure that these young people are given the support at all aspects of the service from the local authority. So, you know, we could look back in hindsight. The decision was made at the right time on the information available, but certainly from my own point of view, trying to change the ethos of children's services in Dumfries and Galloway, this is not the way that we would wish to work with our young people, and we have worked tirelessly over the last 7 years to change the way in which we deliver children's services to be much more inclusive of all the partners and most importantly our children and young people. So certainly happy if you wish more information on the way in which we now deliver services, happy to provide that for you. But Kieran Ryan House itself is not fit for purpose for caring for young people. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Sloan, do you want to come back?
Yeah, in some ways I was pleased to hear Lillian say that from the start she didn't think Kieran Ryan House was fit for purpose. So for that reason I'd like to know how much money was spent on it, buying it, refurbishing it, and how much money we would hope to retrieve on this. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds wasted again, and yet it seems to be the big boy that's done it and run away. I'd like to know who's responsible, who took us down that road, and why they took us down that road.
Okay, Councillor Sloan, thanks for the question. It's a perfectly justified one to ask. Lillian, are you able to help with that?
I can certainly go back through the history, Councillor Sloan, and see if I can establish how much it cost to purchase the building. Clearly, I wasn't here at the time, but I can certainly look into that matter for you, and we will engage with the Strategic Asset Board if members agree with the recommendations, and then I would presume it will be market value, but that's something that I couldn't answer at this moment in time. However, I give you assurance that I'll find out as much information as I can and have that provided. Thank you.
So just for the benefit of the record, Councillor Sloan's asking about finding out how much we would have lost through the transactions.
I can't answer that question at this moment, Chair, but I will look into that for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, Councillor Sloan has actually, I think, touched on what we all felt about this. I remember that we were rather dragged, kicking and squealing, into this. There was a sense that social work felt that they absolutely had to have control of the situation. They had to have a particular facility, and it was put in Kieran Ryan, which some people felt was really inappropriate, and there were difficulties. I very much appreciate that social work leadership has utterly changed, and I very much welcome that we have moved away from that particular model. Nevertheless, Councillor Stone's question is about outcomes, and I would like to have some indication about how we will know this is actually going to improve things for children from the east who are clearly being placed inappropriately in the west, and for children and families in the west who now have access to the new community facilities, which I totally welcome. I think it's absolutely the right way forward. But I think, you know, from the point of view of the public purse, and let's face it, it was only 10 years ago since we went down this particular route. From the point of view of the public purse now, I think we should be seeking to know how this is going to improve things and that we are going to get value for money. Because going back to the previous report, actually a lot of money is being put into children's services, you know, on a one-off basis, admittedly, but I think that we need to be quite focused on looking to see what is being achieved with this investment.
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. I mean, I think it's quite right that we try and articulate the sins of the fathers, if you like, and that's where we've ended up today. But ultimately, we have to design a service for now going forward, and I think that's really where we're trying to get to. I think your question about how do we measure improvements and outcomes is fair and appropriate, and that's something we should be kept appraised of, and I'll hand over to Lillian, who can give you a professional answer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Can I just confirm one point? There's been no children from the East placed in the West at all since 2020, since we stopped using the unit. And the outreach service now covers the whole of the region. And obviously Sheila has very clearly touched on that we're working with 60 children, whereas the staff before would have been working with 4 young people. But happy to provide through the update that we are providing the elected members through the committee, with the update on the early intervention, additional resource for 18 months, and I certainly will have Stephen and Sheila add some elements around the outreach service to those reporting parameters that we report every 6 months to Social Work Committee. So more than happy to do that, and absolutely assure members that we are looking at delivering a much more intervention effective locality service. So we are not delivering services to those in the East at points in the West. So I can give you that assurance, and happy to bring back much more detail moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Chair, for letting me back in. And I think firstly, it's an observation. The 2 recommendations should maybe have been part of 2 separate papers, because it's a bit unfortunate. It kind of blurs the edges a wee bit, but we are where we are and we can deal with that. Obviously we're sensible enough to do that. Just getting back to Tommy's question there about some in the room will remember that in 2012 the incoming administration inherited a situation in Kinryan House, and it was obvious from the start, it was obvious from the staff point of view, it was barely manageable. I think Tommy's absolutely right. And there was a significant amount of money were spent on it. And I think your words, the sins of the father, you're absolutely right. It was an inherited problem that we got. I'd be interested to see what that money, you know, what that kind of figure is. Yes, but it's no really consideration here today. We owe due respect to Tommy. That's a different question for another time, I would suggest. And my understanding at the time was that it was there in place because they didn't want the kids from the West having to travel all the way to the East to get housed. That was the original. I might be wrong in that, my memory might be failing me a wee bit, but it was 2012, and the decision had been taken in the term before that. So it'd be interesting to see what Lillian finds out about the history, so that the whole thing. And I'm not so sure if Sheila was actually in the current role she's in then, so she's maybe not able to tell us either. But I'll look forward to getting that kind of information, just for information's sake. Yeah, but I don't think it's got any bearing on what we're talking about here today. Right? And we need to focus on what's in the paper in front of us. It's been my suggestion through you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. And I think it's reports like this that prompt questions that are quite justified, maybe not necessarily for the paper in front of us, but I think we've got an assurance that we'll get that information back, so we'll know what the expenditure was, and maybe it'll throw some light on why we took those decisions back back when they were taken, and how we had to deal with that. But ultimately, this is about business today and moving forward. And while we have to recognise that we maybe could have taken better decisions, we have to still make decisions today. So I've got Councillor Dempster on the Teams chat function. Councillor Dempster.
Hey, thanks, Chair. I'm afraid I don't share the enthusiasm for chasing shadows and looking to blame somebody for 10 or 20 years ago's work. What we should be doing is concentrating on what we're doing today, how we're providing a service to the children that most need it, and anything that happened in the past can be investigated as much as you want, but not change things. And Councillor Maitland's right in that, and as far as Councillor Ferguson's views are concerned, we did what we did in the best interest of the children at the time. That I think was fair and reasonable. Times have changed, we have to move on. And I'd be wanting our staff to concentrate on what we do for the children now, rather than chasing a 10-year-old historic thing that will make no difference at the end of the day, whether it's £1 or £1 million you spent. It was done at the time in the best interest of the children, and that has changed now, and we should be moving forward. And I would be really concerned if we're using up senior officers' time chasing information that will make no difference and no change what we need to do in the future.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dempster. It's more of a sort of a bit of wisdom there and a point being made, but I think it'll be a matter of fact how much money's been spent, and I'm sure that's fairly easily to establish because it'll be on record somewhere. So it's just about digging out that particular information, and I think that can be readily shared. But I do want to focus on the report in front of us, ultimately, because that's what we're here to do. One last time, Councillor Sloan, then we'll go to the recommendations. Yeah,
Councillor Dempster says that looking for hundreds of thousands of pounds that have been spent either properly or improperly, as that's to be proven, is chasing shadows. Those shadows I'll chase all day. We have got to have a report that tells us exactly who was responsible for the purchase, why they thought it was a good thing, and why so suddenly, within 10, did we not have 10 years foresight within a management team to tell us that this was not, this wouldn't be required down the line? I just feel we need that independent review or in-house review of exactly what happened.
Okay, well, I think for today, we're going to deal with this business in front of us. I think before we can move forward in any of the other subject matters that you're talking about there, we would first get the information back about what's been spent, because that's a matter of counting numbers effectively. And I think based on whatever comes back from that, you can chase whatever shadows you like all day, but I think we need to get the information in front of us first. So I think that's effectively what Lillian has offered to do. If you're happy with that as a first step, then we can get that information and then take it forward.
Chair, can I just say I'm having difficulty with the heating with the windows open, and I realise that they've got to be open. Are you still saying we'll have a review on exactly what happened at the time and through the years till now?
What I'm saying is we're going to deal with today's business. We'll get the information back from Lillian in terms of any expenditure on the house which we're looking to dispose. And I think we can't really say whether or not we should have a review until we know what we're talking about. So I think we need to get the data, the information in front of us first, and then we'll take it from there. I've got Councillor Dempster wants to come back in, so I'll let him in, and then we'll go to the recommendations.
Yeah, Chair, but you keep saying we'll deal with today's business. This is today's business.
Okay. All I'll say on this is Lillian's given an undertaking to come back with the financial information you requested, so that'll happen. That's all we can do about that today. Today's business, as far as I'm concerned, is the recommendations in this report. You've asked a fairly valid question, and that's been taken on board, and you'll get an answer to that. But we can't really do any more than that today, other than deal with what's in front of us. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to say, and I'm not going to waste your time, just to say all of the spend will have been made after a report was presented to elected members, and elected members will have made that decision. And Councillor Sloan and others need to bear that in mind. These will not be officers. The recommendation may have come from them, but the decision was made by elected members, and I'd be concerned if we're starting a process that's, in my view, You may want to know the information, but it make no difference because these are elected members' decisions made during the course of that process, and I'd be absolutely certain about that. And but that's me finished with that, Chairman. I'm happy to go with what members want to see, but bear in mind, these are the members' decisions, every one of them.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Dempster. I mean, a lot of this is a matter of public record. No, Tommy, you've had a few goes at this.
Point. I only want to say that it's not just the members that need this information. The public needs the information. We need to get it out there.
Yes, and without wanting to say the same thing over and over again, we're getting the information back from Lillian. I don't know if you want to have a final word on this, Lillian, but I'd like to turn to the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. I'll certainly find out as much as I can. Have already received an email to say that the purchase was 390k and it was verified by the district valuer in Scotland, and that was a press release on the 14th of February 2012. I will look out previous committee papers and see what the recommendations were, but obviously at that point that decision was presented to committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Okay, so we'll go to the recommendations, which is firstly to note the progress of the service redesign consultation, which is undertaken with the staff at Cairnryan House, and the outcome of the consultation progress as detailed in the paragraphs. Are we happy to note that? Okay, thank you. And the second one is to recommend to the Strategic Asset Board that the building, Cairnryan House, has access to service requirements as detailed in paragraph 311.7. Are we happy to do that? Thank you. And obviously there's a number of different pieces of information that the committee through the members have requested, and we'll get those in due course. Thank you very much. So that takes us on to item 6, which is the National Care Service consultation. We have Lillian here and Stephen Morgan as Senior Manager, Children and Families, to speak to this report. Obviously, we've recently heard this at full council, and this is our opportunity at social work to effectively endorse and agree the position statement, which you'll have in front of you at Appendix 1 and 2, which is our response as a council and also background responses from members so far. This did get a good airing at full council, and obviously it's been round the houses, as it were. So this is our final chance, if you like. Unfortunately, no other members have taken up the opportunity to add further information to this. So it's up to the Social Work Committee to add the final touch. Although everybody did get an opportunity at full council, so I presume that was sufficient for those, and the reports we have in front of us have tried to capture that. Stephen's here. I don't know if Lillian or Stephen wants to go first in terms of speaking to the report, if there's anything else, but ultimately this is up to members to agree. So,
nothing to add, Chair. Just obviously Stephen facilitated the seminar and attended full council on my behalf, so we have tried to capture what we believe to be the conversation using the detail on the day and also listening to recordings. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. So I've got Councillor John Campbell to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I welcome this report. I also welcome what was agreed at full council to finalise it at Social Work Committee. However, I'm a wee bit at a loss on paragraph 3.9, and it's referenced again in Appendix 1. I mean, it speaks about the promise. I mean, and there was also a link for those who had the electronic version on their laptops or tablets, which you can go into the promise, which looks to me as an external body, and it does make reference to this in the care review report. However, I don't know what the promise is or why this particular paragraph is in here. It was neither raised at full council, it was neither raised at the seminar I attended. So maybe if I can get some kind of report on that particular section in the paper, because after all we are here to endorse and agree the position statement, which is a statement from this local authority, which I do welcome to go forward. But anybody reading that particular paragraph, especially members of the public, I mean, I was at a loss, so I'm sure members of the public would be at a loss of what the promise was about. in particular the last two sentences where it says the proposals set out in the consultation document are potentially at odds with the content set out in the Promise Plan 2021-2024, and we cannot afford for the promise to be lost or subsumed by the National Care Service. So I'd be interested to hear what Stephen or Lillian has on that particular paragraph and why that should be on this particular statement going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I mean, I read that as well, and I think within the actual consultation document itself, it references the promise from the position of setting out that so as not to fragment the system, this is why it's included in the actual consultation. However, I think the view of this council has always been about, well, there's a danger of fragmenting something we've already got in place here between education and our services, for example. So, so there's maybe two diametrically opposed positions there, and I think one of the issues might have been the level of detail in the consultation as set out. But I mean, you're right enough in saying, I mean, I listened back to the recording myself, and we didn't discuss the promise as members, but it might be the best way that the officers who live and breathe this work every day can sort of capture that information in a sort of distilled form. But I'll hand over to Stephen first to pick that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the promise, I will provide a report to this committee at the next available opportunity, so you're fully aware of what that is. Totally accept the point in relation to the level of detail about the promise, and it wasn't discussed at full council in that level of detail, but what we've tried to capture is the promise was a review of the childcare system. That took 3 years and has a 10-year implementation plan. The National Care Service is going to be implemented prior to the promise being concluded, but children's services are proposed to be within that. So I think there is that kind of diametrically opposed position, as you mentioned, Chair. So we need to be clear. Happy to take that paragraph out and that reference, but what we can do is strengthen that by saying what elected members did specifically say is the links between schools and local services, for example. So happy to amend that if that's what the wish of the committee is.
Thanks, Stephen. I think a report on the promise would probably be very welcome because that's obviously all these elements do tie together, and they're quite tectonic blocks in terms of local and national picture. I don't know if we've got any other questions from members. There's nothing in the chat function. Councillor Maitland.
Yes, I'm interested in what is being said. I think, unfortunately, probably what was discussed within the promise is that the thoughts are being telescoped, and probably what is being got at is the impact for people using these services. This is on page 34 of our papers. It's about the joined-up approach across other essential services, such as education, youth work, housing, public safety and protection. And what we are concerned about is the possibility of unpicking those well-made and carefully made relationships and fabric that we have woven together in Dumfries and Galloway to be sure that we are all facing the right way, and we share information and we maximise the opportunities that these services give to the benefit of our vulnerable children in particular. And that's the bit, I think, which actually possibly needs to be expanded in the context of the promise, about which actually I don't know a tremendous amount, except headline comments and headline reports there. So, while I understand why it's been put in there, it's possibly really not expanded upon enough so that people understand what is being said and why. So I think we could do with another sentence. I don't want to remove the comment that has been made, because it's what it's about. It's about the fact that we've got services here in the council together. And what would have been helpful possibly is a little bit more expansion in the paper to explain to members what is actually being said.
So just building, because there's a few members obviously wanting to come in, but that sort of builds on Councillor John Campbell's original point, and maybe that level of extra detail would help clarify exactly what that, just on that, and then I'll let other members in.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think Councillor Maitland has probably put it better than myself in what I would like to see in the report. I mean, the paragraph itself does need to be explained so that members of the public and ourselves can understand exactly what we're actually talking about, rather than just a blanket expression. So I'm quite happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, and Stephen's nodding his head there. I think, is that something that you can maybe amend in terms of adding that additional detail? I'm aware other members might have, well, may not all share the same view, so just on that, Councillor Sloan first.
Yeah, it's confusing when you read it, because you get to the end of it and you think, well, who is then going to be accountable for the social services in Dumfries and Galloway? The First Minister seems to be pushing it in the road of Holyrood taking over, local government being ousted from the social works and the health service. But who will take responsibility? At the end of the day, if we're not making the decisions, we shouldn't have to take the responsibility. And it looks like we won't be making the decisions.
I mean, that's more of an observation and a concern, but I think we have tried to capture in the responses notes to date, just in terms of, well, how do we deal with accountability and what's that going to look like? So, Stephen, I don't know if you want to maybe expand on that for the benefit of Councillor Sloan.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Councillor Sloan makes a very valid point. One of the main issues that elected members discussed was the lack of detail in the consultation document, specifically around the additional services that have been added to the National Care Service, such as children's social work, drug and alcohol services, etc., justice services. So we don't really have that level of detail, and I think we've tried to capture that in the response by saying we're unsure of the detail, we don't know what it means for local democracy, etc. So valid question, and one that we're asking ourselves. Clearly, the consultation makes reference to a national social work service, but it doesn't give us enough detail around how that would be governed and how that would be set up and what the local accountability would be. So it's a fair point, and hopefully we've captured that in the response without going into specific detail.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Elaine Murray in the chat function, and then Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think some of the points that Councillor Sloan is making are contained in the section on the impact on local decision making, because it was one of the major concerns that elected members had, was actually who is responsible, who is accountable, what was the how, you know, the new care service will be accountable to Scottish ministers, not to local elected members, and what was the role of the local authority and local elected members. Now, on the promise, I think Jane Maitland's covered quite a bit of that, but we didn't use the terminology, the promise, but there was a lot of concern about breaking the links with children's services and education, housing and other services provided by the council. So, you know, if children's services are removed from local authorities, which this is proposing, how do we ensure that those links and that joint working, which is necessary for children's well-being, is maintained? And I think that is contained in it. But obviously, people didn't recognise the promise as being what that was about. I just had a quick look through my diary, because I recalled having seen a seminar on delivering the promise, which I think is due on the 12th of November at 3 o'clock, having a quick look at the diary. So there will be an opportunity for members to learn more about what the promise is about. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Murray. And a timely reminder, I think that's certainly something that would recommend members to attend that seminar. And forgive me for being remiss, because I'd forgotten that was in the diary. But obviously with the seminar and a future report, that will certainly help members get a better understanding of what that means. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Chair. Let's stick to the business in front of us today. The paragraph at 3.9 wasn't discussed, my understanding and my recollection, either at full council or in those words. To put something else in there now to justify it. The fundamental question here is, whose response to the consultation is this? Right? Is it elected members? Yes, the Dumfries Galloway Council, right? Because the professionals have recourse to other routes to put their concerns in. And because it wasn't discussed at full council, it was never discussed, as far as I'm aware, the meetings I was at about the consultation events, is where's the justification for that paragraph? That doesn't mean to say I don't agree with the content of it, but I'm talking about the justification of why it's in the members' response when the members didn't take a decision. I know this is a final decision today, so we've a big decision to make here: is do we leave that in with some extra words in it, or do we take it out? Given that the elected members are only going to be getting the seminar for the explanations, or to explore, whatever you want to call it, the vow, or the, wrong promise. But you get my point. Well after the closing date for this consultation is to go in. I think, to be reasonable, I think now it's in, it's a public document, people have seen it. We do need to have quite a bit of explanation round about that, and maybe suggest that the seminar on this process should have been done sometime before we came to making this decision to actually this is our response, because this isn't a new initiative. Relatively, yes, but not new. We could have had it. We could have had the seminar. We could have understood it better, right, and then made a decision. We probably would have made a decision to put that paragraph in. You know, we hindsight, but that's hindsight. We didn't do that, so I'm not going to die in a ditch over this, but we need to be really clear with the extra words that go in, given it's the final response from Dumfries and Galloway Council, right, that we're absolutely happy with the new words that are going in. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. And I think, I mean, there is a question of provenance, as in where did that come from and how did it get there, sort of thing. But I think, given what we've heard already and the additional explanation that we could add to that to clarify exactly what the promise is effectively shorthand for, if you like, we will obviously get that information coming back to us in the form of seminars and future reports. But like you say, I don't think we would have captured it in that form because we maybe weren't fully aware of what that was and how it sat in context. But I think, and I'm taking this as being what Stephen said already, that effectively by gathering the data that has been fed back, this is kind of what that is. However, that was maybe an assumption, I don't know. But I'll let Stephen speak to that, and then Lillian's wanting to come in first. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for letting me come in. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson, for those comments, and other members. I clearly wasn't at the seminar, but I've read the notes and, as I said, listened to the recording, and I wonder if it's a use of language. I think there's been a clarity today that members are clear that their concerns around the joined-up approach of children's services, and actually if we remove the use of the language of the promise and replace that with children's services, would that be an acceptable way forward? We have to reflect on the use of language, and you're absolutely correct, Chair, that we understand the process professionally, and I can only say that I think it's a use of language, and if members would be happier, more content that we are talking about children's services, that we are concerned about the disjointing of services, and that would be the response, if that would be an acceptable way forward, which we could reproduce a position statement and proposed response from the Council for consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. That's helpful, I think. I mean, I'm in members' hands, really, because ultimately we want to get the message back that the essence of that is what we're concerned about. The language, I think Lillian's highlighted the point about the professional understanding and the member understanding. We might be actually saying the same thing, but it's maybe better said in members' words. I don't know. Councillor Ferguson, want to come back?
Yeah, I agree broadly with what Lillian's proposed route to take this is a sound, sensible one. I'm wondering, though, if we can also get some evidence as to how, in quite significant numbers of local authority areas in Scotland where children's services are actually under the IGB, right? There are significant numbers, yes. And plus, as it stands just now, the NHS and Dumfries and Galloway children's services side are in the IGB. So I appreciate the new body will overtake the IGB, but I would think they'd be looking at good practice all round. And just, I suppose, what I'm looking for here is some form of considered setting out of the experiences elsewhere. Now, the experiences elsewhere might actually be pretty negative. You know about mixed and shared services, adult services through the IGB. We've gone down a particular route here, but not all 32 local authorities went down the same way. Right? So it'd be interesting if we could actually get some evidence and some views back on the positives or negatives of areas where children's services have been included in a different way than what we do it here. I think that's probably the best way of putting it.
Okay. I'm trying to sort of parse that. I think we have to be careful that we're making our responses to Dumfries and Galloway Council, and I think we've obviously done the bulk of that and heard that at full council, and here we're maybe refining that, maybe just getting the words right, if you like. Councillor Sloan's made the important point about the democratic accountability, which is captured in the report. I think we're trying to talk about the risks of disentangling services that we already work in part, with our own sort of way of delivering, and the risks that might have, understanding the wider context. And I think it's quite right that we capture that in our language as members. In terms of benchmarking other local authorities, I think even in the consultation framework document, it's sort of set out the number of different local authorities where children's services were either in or not in the IGB, for example, and it's a mixed picture across the piece, as you'll know. But ultimately, we have to give our response bearing all that in mind. So I'll maybe let Jane come in first, and then I'll hand over to Lillian, if that's okay.
Well, Chairman, I think this has actually been really, in many ways, very helpful. And I think it certainly clarified in my mind. I would suggest that we agree it as it is. I think it's rather good that we've actually mentioned, we've got the First Minister in here, we've mentioned what she's said as far as basically giving these children, our children, the love that they deserve and the childhood that they deserve. I'm very happy to have that in there. Actually, I think it's really it's very telling that we recognise that that she made a commitment and that we want to honour that. But we are saying, but please be aware that the work was being done as a result of what you asked us to do, indicates that we should be really careful not to unpick the GERFEC approach, because after all, that's what they are trying to achieve, without the C at the end, getting it right for everyone. So I would suggest, Chairman, actually, that we leave it exactly as it is. Having had this good debate and understanding what is actually meant by this, I suggest you accept it as it is. We've had advice from the officers' report. We've received that in there. And this now, if we agree, it becomes our response to this consultation. So I suggest that we take it as it is.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Maitland. I think we nearly had a position where we could have taken it as it is with a bit of explanation as to the promise and that additional wording. I don't know if that would be helpful just for the benefit of the public on Councillor Campbell's point. That seemed to be at least more transparent, I think, and would still allow for that to go ahead. So, but I'll hand over to Lillian, as I said I would, so, and then I think Councillor Murray's wanting in as well. So, Lillian.
Thank you, Chair. Just if I could come back on Councillor Ferguson's request, I think the information that we could probably give you, Councillor Ferguson, is already contained within the consultation document. It would be very difficult for us to make assessment of the outcomes and the positive or negatives of other schemes of delegation. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Ferguson, you want to quick come back, then I'll let Councillor Murray in, and then Councillor John Campbell.
Lillian's point's very well made, and I do appreciate that. It's almost impossible at this late stage to do that. I was kind of wishful thinking maybe we'd thought about that earlier, but I'm as remiss on this occasion, me rather than officers. I should have asked that question at full council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray first.
Can I first of all, I agree with Jane that I think we shouldn't take the promise out of the response. I think it might be worthwhile including some explanation, but I think it makes a point stronger. If it's referring to a national initiative, I think it actually makes that point stronger, and I would be inclined to keep it in rather than replace it by children's services, even though it was children's services and that link that we were particularly concerned about. On the point about the IJBs, yes, there are a number of IJBs which have children's services within them, but they are within the current structure. They're not within the proposed structure, which takes children's services out of the control. So if children's services are within the IJB, it's still the council which receives a delegation to act. This actually will take children's services out of control, and a lot of other things, out of local authority control altogether, and place them with a body which is responsible only to Scottish ministers. And that's a very different position. And, I agree, I don't think with the chair, this is Dumfries and Galloway Council's response. So it's not actually really for us to respond in regard of any other arrangements other councils and other IJBs have. But even if they do, the proposal is not what exists in other local authority and health board areas. It's something totally different and something, in my view, a lot more centralised. Thanks.
No, thank you, Councillor Murray. And it does go back again to an aspect of local accountability, which is obviously permeates through this. Councillor John Campbell and then Councillor Sloan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, like yourself, I thought we had almost a position there. I was quite happy to leave the paragraph in with the extra wording. I mean, after all, Councillor Murray did say that this is meant to be the council's response. It's not the response from an external body like the promise. Although we do agree, I seem to think that we agree that on some of the wording that Stephen said about the promise or what's in the promise. And if the paragraph stays in with the additional wording, I'm quite happy for that to go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, just on that point, Jane, and then Councillor Sloan.
Yes, if you could just have what wording is proposed.
We'll come to that in a little minute. Councillor Sloan. No, it's definitely you.
One of the things that worries me when reading the document is the inequality in service, east and west of the region. Now it's clear, it's recognised. That's my phone. If you can just allow me to switch it off. Sorry, Chair, I apologise for that. As I say, the inequity of service across our region is stark at times, and I'm not seeing anything in here to redress that. I agree with you in most of what's in this paper. Apart from the promise, I don't think we should make the promise, because people are fed up with national government and local government breaking their promises. So don't make promises that we cannot keep. We're relying on the Scottish Government to keep it. And I certainly wouldn't want to be relying on that, sure. So if we could get something that comes back to us, Chair, about the equality and inequality from the sides of the region, different sides of the region. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sloan. I mean, I think that's it's going to be an internal problem about the allocation of resources in what's deemed to be equitable across the region. Clearly, there's always a tension when we're trying to invest in equity for everybody and how we can actually implement that in a region as diverse as this. So I'm not sure it's really for today's response on the actual consultation, but I would suggest that through our normal business that the members from the West and from the rest of the Council, in fact, make the best case possible to get the resources they need for their communities. And I think we're always in that challenge, and it's difficult. I think in terms of our response today, oh no, I beg your pardon, we have Councillor Hoey wants to come in as well.
Chair, I actually typed in leave. I was going to leave the meeting shortly and come back shortly.
Sorry, I'm confused by my screens. Thanks, Councillor Hoey. I'm glad you're still here to say that. So if we can maybe proceed closer towards making a recommendation on this, because I think everybody's made some very good points. I think we've got to a position where we're broadly in agreement with what's in front of us. Councillor Ferguson, you've got your hand up.
Hopefully I'm going to be helpful. Is that I think we should go with the situation where Stephen tweaks this paragraph the simple way so that we get around the 21 overrule the 43 full council debate and runs that past the chair, vice chair and the political group leaders, because what we had from full council was unanimous across the chamber. So if the wording was then run past the political group leaders and the chair, vice chair of this committee, that would be my suggestion, would be at least address how the other 22, isn't it? Other 22 councillors who've already voted on this or who've already agreed it, so that there's at least a degree of it's gone as best we can. We don't have time to send it back to full council and after that, right? So for me, it would be a reasonable solution if we were to remit that to Stephen to tweak the paragraph, run it past the chair, vice chair and the four main political group leaders, so that we've got, yes, thanks, that's okay, we'll accept that, and then we can get it away to Scottish Government. Hopefully that's helpful.
I mean, obviously I'm in members' hands. It seems like a way forward. I think all we're really asking for is we're basically keeping it as is with the addition of a bit of expansion on the detail about unpicking children's services here. Now, I don't know how complex that needs to be, but Lillian, if you want to come in on that.
Certainly happy to do that, Chair. And I think we will make sure that we emphasise this is children's services, but also the overview of the promise, and we'll be very clear with that. We can certainly do that and follow that process if required. Thank you, Chair.
So I think that's probably as happy as we're going to get, but it seems like a sensible way forward. Are we happy to go along on that basis to note the position statement, endorse and agree with the amendments to be, well, with the slight expansion, if you like, on a detail to be circulated as we've discussed? Okay. Thank you very much, members. That takes us on to item 7, which is Age of Criminal Responsibility Act 2019, implementation within Dumfries and Galloway. And we have Alison Penman here to speak to this. Alison, is there anything you'd like to add to the report before I open it to members?
No, I suppose, are people happy with the report, or do they want an overview?
Members will have read the report. It was really just if there was anything you maybe wanted to draw our attention to, or any particular details you felt were worth asking questions about.
I suppose maybe just to highlight the timing of presentation to committee was in relation to the original implementation date of October. But just 2 weeks ago, we were informed that the implementation date has been delayed. We don't have a current implementation date, but we would see that as coming within the next few months.
Thank you. Members, any questions on the report itself? Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. Good morning, Ali.
Hi, Andy.
I'm assuming here that all these other agencies you've outlined at 313 that are involved in this, because I think one of the questions I asked Stephen out with the meeting was, you know, why social work rather than full council, given that there's a number of... would you see the need for it to come anywhere else other than here? Or is it within the delegations of the Social Work Committee, I suppose, is the question, to do this on behalf of the council?
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. I think for this one I'll ask Lillian to give a response to that, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. I mean, my view would be that this is very clearly social work to lead, so it is a social work function on behalf of the local authority. You're absolutely correct. There are other multi-agency partners who are involved in the process, but the responsibility for the young people and children involved will very squarely sit with social work. My belief is that the delegation to Social Work Committee is the correct place for this to be heard and monitored. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. That's the assurance I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ian Hoey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alison. I appreciate this is something that's coming down the road to us, and you're pretty much the messenger of this report. As a retired police officer, I do have concerns regarding the ability of the police to intervene in criminal activity committed by those under 12 in their presence. Obviously, the serious crime is covered in this, but incidents such as vandalism, hypothetically, somebody, 11-year-old, running a nail along the cars in Lorburn Street, it would appear that the police have no powers to intervene in such a situation. Am I correct in that assumption?
No, the legislation change is only in relation to those very serious crimes that are laid out within the report. So police officers will continue to respond in the way that they have in relation to linking in with our Youth Justice Service to look at early and effective intervention. Now, quite often, currently, the disposal would be a referral to the reporter, and obviously the Act does delete the referral ground for offence grounds for children under the age of 12. However, the practice and the responses will be exactly the same, and it's quite common practice now that children committing offences like that would come through early and effective intervention or EEI processes rather than going through any statutory or formal processes. So that will continue as it is.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just, I don't see other hands up in the room or on the chat function, but it was just about reporting. So I think it does sort of allude to, you know, elected members being one of many partners sort of kept in the conversation, if you like, and it does touch on that information going to the Public Protection Committee, but is there something that elected members, for example, in this committee should see annually or 6 monthly going forward? It's just really to get an understanding of what we might see in future coming back to us. For this one, I'll go to Lillian. I was staring at you on the screen, but I think actually Lillian's in the room, so I'll ask her.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to advise members that through this process, and Alison can confirm this, in the last 4 years we've had no children that have fitted that criteria. So the numbers are likely to be low. However, we are unclear what this will mean moving forward, so we certainly can provide to members of the Social Work Committee a 6 monthly or yearly update, or whichever level of assurance members would require. Thank you.
I think given the number, I'm not sure if an annual or 6 monthly would be appropriate, but I think probably annual given where we're at, and then obviously we can review that as time goes forward. Because I appreciate, Alison, there's things coming down the line in terms of raising the age, but as yet we don't know when that will be. Is that something you maybe want to have a couple of words on?
Yes, so the plan is we're informed that there's a ministerial advisory group that is looking to raise the age of criminal responsibility further to 14 and then subsequently to 16. So whilst currently being the age of 12 has relatively little impact in relation to local implementation, once that's raised to 14, then we would be looking at probably in the area of figures between 5 and 10 for under 14s and potentially 15 to 20 under 16. So that obviously then will have more significant resourcing and practice implications at a local level. But as you said, there are no dates, but we do expect that to be unfolding over the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you. So that's one to watch, I think. With that then, I can't see any other questions either in the chat or in the room. So are we happy to note basically 1, 2 and 3, the provisions within the Act, the progress to date and the implications for further extensions of the Act as detailed? Okay, thank you members. That brings us on to item 8, which is Mental Health Officer Workforce Report. We've been asked to note the findings of the MHO's report and also the local position, and we have Kay Forrest here to speak to us on this one. Kay, there was a couple of questions I'd had prior to this just about the numbers in the report and in the appendix. I'm just wondering if you could maybe just clarify some of those, please.
Of course, good morning. Thank you, Chair. If I can offer an interpretation of the national stats, we don't currently have 17 mental health officers, but we do have 17 posts. I'll come on to explain, and indeed 20 staff in total. Currently, we have 13 MHOs. That's 11 practitioners and 2 managers. But we do have 3 students within the next 2 weeks about to be inducted at Edinburgh University to complete the course. And of course, next year we have the one Grow Your Own as agreed at committee. So we will have 17 MHOs. The other point I'd like to offer you is that members will notice a difference in the numbers worked for Dumfries and Galloway. To let you know that Dumfries and Galloway have the only standalone mental health team and therefore are able to focus specifically on mental health. In addition to that, we have close professional relationships with health colleagues, which keeps us busy, but also helps us enable optimum practice. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Kay. Open to members then for questions on this report. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. Good morning, Kay.
Morning.
I know we've been growing our own for quite some time. Have we any idea how many have moved on to pastures greener, as they might think? Effectively, it means we've lost because they were getting better terms and conditions elsewhere. Have we any idea?
Not a great number. I can think of a couple. Somebody we lost to Glasgow. Aside of that, really in the past, we have a slightly different brand new Grow Your Own process for mental health officers now. In the past, we would have to have had a post to put our member staff into, but this year committee's agreed that we can now start to create studentships. So basically, I suppose that that helps us have a very positive workforce planning that we haven't had before. But pretty much, and across nationally, it's the same. Mental health officers really stay in post. There isn't a great deal of movement. Hence, a number of our members of staff are kind of very experienced, older workers, but we haven't lost many at all.
Thanks very much, Kay. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Maitland.
The report seems to suggest, Chairman, that we are really very well equipped. My question would be, well, how would that feed through into outcomes? How are we going to see that level of resource coming out the other end in forms of better outcomes for people?
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. And I did notice, just on the back of that, just the number of hours as a local authority our MHOs are given in comparison to other MHOs. So I don't know if that's connected, but certainly the outcomes is what we're concerned about. Are you able to add anything to that, Kay?
Sure, of course, thanks. This means that we have a very settled team. We haven't had absences at all for a number of years now. We have a group of very thorough, motivated workers, and I made the point that we work very closely with our health professionals. There are very strong relationships there, and I think that probably enables us to offer a greater standard of care, if I'm being honest with you. The outcomes are demonstrated through, for example, this year there was a Mental Welfare Commission published a report about hospital discharges, and D&G came out, from a social work perspective, came out very well in that report. Some of the stats that I've offered you there, last year we maybe focused on perhaps 14 processes for hospital discharges, and yet this year it's been 47. So we are gradually increasing our standards as we can go along, and that's going to be reflected in new quality assurance processes that will be evident for next year.
Lillian wants to come in on the back of that.
Thanks for question, Councillor Maitland. I think as well, one of the elements for me is to reflect that we were given, Chief Social Work Officers were given additional emergency powers throughout COVID. and I didn't have to instigate any of those, because obviously with individual powers being given, that could raise some legal challenges, so we haven't run that risk, because the mental health team are so ingrained in the partnership working. So it's certainly enhanced the outcomes for the service users due to the joined up approach. And whilst there is a significant resource around the team is extremely busy, and there, you know, we have a huge demand, and I do reflect that some of that is around the positive relationships that have been built over the past, certainly the past 3 to 4 years, to grow that professional input from social work, which should be present in these decisions. Our mental health officers make decisions on service users' liberty, so it should be well skilled, well qualified, and able to have that partnership conversation and joint approach to work. So it's sometimes a difficult one to measure, but on this particular circumstance, I think the fact that we didn't have to implement any emergency powers throughout the pandemic was a reflection on the good, positive working relationship. Thank you.
Councillor Maitland and then Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. If you just allow me to come back, thank you so much. It's really about, well, because of the resource that is there in order to help families and to deal with, to make good team relationships, make a good team approach to a particular problem. Are we seeing fewer challenges through the legal system than other places? I mean, that would seem to me to be an absolute obvious place to look for this.
Thank you. Lillian.
I certainly don't have the exact figures just now, Councillor Maitland, but we could get those for you. We probably not lesser in terms of the interventions, but what we do have outcome evidence is around the length of stay, for example, perhaps in a particular specialist unit, or the early intervention that may prevent an admission to hospital to an acute service. We can certainly get some more information if that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. Lillian's kind of half answered my question there, because I think if we could, over the period, I'm not talking about straight away, get someone put together that would explain to us the varying roles within the mental health service, because the mental health officer is a very specific role. So I think if we could have some form of note, whatever you want to call it, briefing note, that would actually show us how the MHOs fit into the wider psychiatric services. As I say, I don't want to get too case expert, and people are getting mixed up here, because the MHO function, if I remember correctly, is very much a statutory one, which is slightly different from the normal work of a social worker and the wider and the CAMS team and things like that, for example. And I think maybe something to explain the links and how it works, but also explain the differences would be maybe helpful. Elaine.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. I mean, it is something that you write about in your role as Chief Social Work Officer in your annual report, isn't it? So do you want to maybe speak to that?
Yeah, obviously my Chief Social Work Officer report will be coming to next committee. You're absolutely correct, Councillor Ferguson. It is a statutory duty on the local authority to have mental health officers able to undertake the legal duties when someone is in a mental health crisis. Mental health services are different from that, but we can certainly provide information, and we can talk to that through the Chief Social Work Officer report at the next committee if required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. I think this mental health, you sit there watching the television at night and the news, and nearly every news programme's got an issue with mental health somewhere. So the staff have got a very difficult job. And I think just for today, we should pass on our thanks to the mental health officers for the work they're doing in the community to help people and to overcome these issues that they've got with mental health. But I think if we could put into the recommendations that we thank the staff, the mental health staff, for the work they're doing in the community and what they've done in the past with through the lockdowns and whatnot. I think they were under tremendous pressure, and I don't think it's any easier yet. But if we could note our congratulations and thanks to the staff that how they've participated over the piece. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McKee, and I think we probably all recognise the extreme value of the MHOs for the region, and if we can maybe capture that somehow, either as to commend or to recognise the work of the MHOs, I think that would be totally appropriate, especially given the very unusual global situation we've found ourselves in. Councillor Ferguson. That was exactly the point I was making, and Lillian's agreed with me, because we need to not taking anything away for the MHO cohort, but if we're looking at the wider mental health teams, both joint teams and council teams, then that's a different kettle of fish altogether. And it was kind of what was behind my last interjection, is that we need to be really clear here what the role of the MHO is, and the role of the wider CAMS team, for example, or adult mental health teams or whatever. So Jock's plea is really well made, right? I think everybody agrees with him, we should be thanking them. But this report's actually very dedicated with MHOs, and I think maybe that's something that will come up, Jock, when we do the Chief Social Workers report next time round. I think that would probably be a better place to do that, because it's another, what, 3 months down the line, is it? 2 months down the line? Rather than help blur the edges even worse as to what the roles are. I think, Lillian's smiling, so I'm assuming that she's picked up what I'm getting at. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this specific report speaks about the 21 staff in the team of that support the MHOs. So I think there's absolutely no harm at all in recognising that team and the work that they do. But I think there is a broader cohort of people serving the benefit of the residents by supporting mental health, etc. Councillor Ferguson. If it would help, we can actually do a general comment at the end through you, and that gets the message out now that we're thanking them. But it wouldn't just be the mental health teams, it would be all the social work teams and everything as a general statement at the end. We could do that through you, Chair, if you give us that 2 minutes to do it. I'm sure Mr McKee would lead the charge. And no, it's to second them. This is very much a committee for the members, I think. So I think if we want to give thanks, then we should, and I have absolutely no objection to that at all. I think there's we're talking about full council. I think further congratulations and thanks to staff. With the pressures they've been under during this last year in the pandemic, congratulations need to go to the whole staff. But we're talking specifically here about MHOs. That's where I come from. I don't have a problem with that. So I mean, unless we've got a major objection, I think we should just endorse that. With that, then, can we note the findings of the mental health officer's report and also the local position in respect of MHOs? Thank you. I don't see anything else in the chat. And that takes us finally on to item number 9, which is the minute of the Public Protection Committee for a meeting of the 22nd of June, and that's just for noting. Happy to note. Thank you very much. I have no other business deemed urgent, so that ends the meeting. Thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you, Chair.